The forest consumed them, one after the other, as the moon bled its pale glow through the gnarled skeletal branches. Bare feet sank silently into the damp earth, moving with quiet certainty, pulled by an invisible pull. The air was thick with the stench of rot and a sickly sweet undertone, something patiently waiting. Shadows flitted between the trees, forms twisting in the murky haze. At the center of the clearing, a fire burned low, its embers pulsing like a fading heartbeat. No words were spoken, none were needed. The ritual was set, the time had arrived. Darkness, damp earth, the scent of decay and something sweet, something rich like roasted meat and overripe fruit. He opened his eyes, blinking against the shadows that pressed in around him. Trees loomed above, gnarled and ancient, their twisted limbs blocking out the moonlight. A cold wind slithered through the forest, whispering through brittle leaves. He did not know how he had come to be here. He did not know who he was. Panic coiled in his gut, but before it could take hold, a sound drifted through the trees. The murmur of voices, the clink of goblets, the crackling of fire. It beckoned him, warm and inviting, cutting through the cold emptiness in his mind. Drawn forward, he stepped over roots and fallen branches, his bare feet silent against the forest floor. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a great wooden table stretching long and wide beneath a canopy of night. Dozens of figures sat around it, their faces obscured by dark hoods. Candles flickered in iron candelabras, their flames reflecting in silver platters piled high with glistening meats, steaming bread, and fruits that dripped with juice. Goblets brimming with deep red wine stood at every place setting, and the scent of it all, rich, intoxicating, made his stomach tighten with hunger. As he hesitated at the edge of the clearing, one of the robed figures turned to him. Though their face remained hidden beneath their hood, their voice was warm, familiar. "Come, honored guest, you are expected." Something inside him shuddered at those words. He wanted to protest, to ask who he was, why he was here, but his throat felt tight, his tongue heavy. His feet moved of their own accord, carrying him toward an empty seat at the head of the table. The robed figure shifted as one, a silent acknowledgement, a welcome. He sat. Before him, a golden plate gleamed, empty. A single goblet waited beside it, filled to the brim with dark wine. The figure beside him lifted a silver spoon and gestured toward the table. "Eat, the feast is yours." His hand trembled as he reached out. He tore a piece of bread and brought it to his lips. The moment it touched his tongue, his mind shuddered. A vision, flashes of movement, of blood, of steel slicing through flesh, a scream cut short. He gasped, dropping the bread. His hands shook. "What?" His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar. "What is this?" The robed figure beside him chuckled softly. "Memory." He swallowed, his heart pounding. "I don't understand." The figure picked up a goblet and swirled the wine inside. "You will." Against his better judgment, he took another bite. More memories surfaced, faces, expressions twisted in fear, hands reaching out, pleading. His own hands gripping a blade, the weight of steel, the warmth of blood. His breath came in shallow gasps. He looked around the table, his vision swimming. The feast continued as if nothing had happened, as if the others did not notice his horror. But of course, they did. They were waiting. The figure beside him leaned in. "It is always like this," they said softly. "Each time the pieces return slowly, and you struggle to understand. But in the end you remember, and then you must choose." He gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady himself. "Choose?" The figure lifted the goblet before him. "To remember and carry the weight of what you have done, or to forget once more. To drink and be free." He stared at the goblet. The wine inside was dark, almost black in the candlelight. It smelled of spices and something deeper, something older than time itself. His mind reeled. The memories were clearer now, each piece sliding into place with horrifying clarity. The faces of those he had wronged, the bodies left in his wake, the choices made in the pursuit of power, of greed, of vengeance. His name, was on the tip of his tongue, waiting to be reclaimed. But the weight of it, oh, the weight, his hands clenched into fists. He did not want to bear it. The figure beside him spoke again, their voice gentle, patient. This is not the first time you have sat at this table. Not the first time you have chosen. You have been given the chance to remember. And each time, you have let it go. His gaze flickered to them, his breath shallow. Why? The figure exhaled. Because knowledge is pain, and some souls would rather be lost than suffer beneath it. The goblet gleamed before him. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He thought of the past, the horror of it. He thought of the future, the weight of what he had done pressing down upon him, never to be lifted. He could not carry it. He had never been able to. With a shaking hand, he lifted the goblet to his lips. The wine was thick, sweet, warm as it slid down his throat. A numbness spread through him, a veil drawing over his mind, blurring the edges of memory. The names, the faces, the guilt, all of it faded, slipping through his grasp like smoke on the wind. He set the goblet down, exhaling. The weight was gone. The burden lifted. He was free. The figure beside him nodded in solemn understanding. So it is chosen. The candlelight flickered. The feast stretched long into the night, the voices warm and welcoming. The forest swayed in the wind, and above them, the sky turned ever darker. And somewhere, deep in the forgotten recesses of his mind, a past self wept, knowing that the cycle would begin again. Darkness, damp earth, the scent of decay, and something sweet, something rich like roasted meat and overripe fruit. He opened his eyes. The fire crackled, the hooded figures watching him with silent reverence. But now, something was different. A figure at the far end of the table, face shadowed, did not partake of the feast. They sat still, waiting, watching him with an intensity that unsettled him. A whisper crawled through his mind. Break the cycle. Remember. His fingers twitched. The choice had always been his, but had he ever truly had the strength to make it? Thank you for joining me this evening. Before you go, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. If you have an idea for a short, scary story, leave it in the comments below. See you at the next campfire.